Welcome to Obsessions After Dark, where the morally gray are irresistible, the red flags wave proudly, and happily ever after comes with trigger warnings. We're your hosts, Lori.
And Cassie, and each week we're diving into the darkest corners of romance, breaking down the books, the characters, the chaos, and everything that keeps you turning pages long past midnight.
This podcast discusses fictional books intended for adult readers. We'll be discussing mature themes found in dark romance. Please protect your mental health.
All right, so welcome back to Obsessions After Dark. If you were with us for our first episode, we went over everything Dark Romance 101. We talked about our scale that we're going to be implementing for all of the books that we do here. We also discussed common misconceptions, general tropes, and why we love this genre so much.
Yeah, and now that you've gotten to know us a little bit, it's time to dive into one of our absolute favorite series. Today, we're talking all about Leigh Rivers' Edge of Darkness trilogy. Disclaimer, this will contain spoilers, so if you're not comfortable with that, please skip this episode. Now, instead of doing a full book recap, we want to focus on what really makes this trilogy unforgettable, the characters.
Yeah, these characters are very complex. They're morally gray, heartbreaking, frustrating, and yet somehow they manage to live rent-free in our heads.
Yeah, they've lived rent-free in mine since I first read them. I was ruined the first time and each time after. So, like we said, we're going to be talking about the characters of the trilogy and what we loved, what shocked us, the relationships that had us hooked, and maybe even some different opinions along the way.
If you've read these books, we'd love to hear from you and tell us which characters that you had as your favorite, which characters that you defend no matter what decisions they made, and which characters you just couldn't stand.
Okay, let's jump into it. So, Cassie, let's start with the main character of the book and also Tobias. Tell us about both of those characters and how they are different from other dark romance MMCs.
Yeah, as you said, Kade is our MMC. He's the son of Tobias Mitchell, the notorious psychopath that's in an American prison. He has a twin sister, Luciella. He is also best friends with Sebastian Prince, or Base, that actually turns out to be the leader of the Russian mafia later on. He is also Stacey, our FMC's ex, and those two have a very complicated past. But before we get into that, let's get to the root of Kade. At first glance, he looks like your typical obsessive, dark romance anti-hero who's kind of stalking his ex-girlfriend. But there is so much more to Kade than just an obsessive stalker. He's actually a deeply traumatized man who has spent years surviving unimaginable abuse, manipulation, and psychological conditioning. I think what makes Kade stand out so much is that he is actually a victim in his own right. Normally, we see females as the victim in dark romance, but in true Leigh tradition, she did a great job of switching that up on us. As the trilogy unfolds, we keep discovering different layers of Kade's past. And then suddenly his actions, even the more questionable ones, start to make sense. He's a survivor. But the fun part about this journey that we go on, it's not just about his obsession with Stacey. It's about trauma, survival, redemption, and forgiveness, and asking whether someone who has done all the terrible things that Kade has done, but also had all these horrible things done to him, deserves to be loved.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about Kade and what he goes through. So we learn that he ends up being sex trafficked by the Sawyers. But a little bit of his backstory, like you said, he's Tobias Mitchell's son. And if anybody has read Psychotic Obsession, then you'll get a lot of backstory about Tobias. Now, disclaimer there, the original trilogy was written and then Psychotic Obsession after. But chronologically, Psychotic Obsession comes first. And it's our opinion to read that first because it teaches you a lot about who Tobias is and that impacts who you see Kade as. So would you agree with that, Cassie?
Yeah, I'm definitely a chronological kind of person.
Yeah.
Even though I know everybody says to wait till the end, I agree. You can read it first.
Yeah. So Tobias is a psychopath. And we see a lot of those tendencies in Kade, even from the very beginning. So he meets Stacey when he's 15. It's his and his twin sister, Luciella's birthday party. And Kade sees her out by the pool. And from that moment on, he becomes obsessed with her. He has his dad's obsessive tendencies for sure. And what's unique about that is that he says in the book that prior to that, and we learn even after, that he never has any sexual desires or any desires to be with anyone. He only feels that way about her, similar to how Tobias does with Arya, which I think is pretty unique. Now, with that in mind, Cassie, do you think that his obsessive protective streak was already hardwired into his DNA from his dad? Or do you think that the trauma that kind of unfolds through the books molds him into the man he becomes?
I think a little bit of both. So he has Tobias's tendencies, that's obvious. But the thing is, he's trying so hard not to be Tobias. Because if you listen to how he talks about Tobias, he's kind of upset with him. You know, he doesn't want Arya with him at all. He has made it clear multiple times that he thinks that Ewan is the better fit for his mom. So I think that even though he does have these tendencies, that he's still trying so hard to fight against it because he doesn't want to become like his dad. But then we see his journey and everything that goes on and how Bernadette doesn't give him a choice but to become this obsessive man because he's trying so hard to keep everybody he loves safe.
Yeah, and I thought that was pretty interesting. The first time that I read through the trilogy, I really didn't pay attention to that. But going back through this time, I really realized how much he just did not want to be like his dad. He was always afraid of becoming Tobias. And then, like you said about his mom, Arya, and her husband, Ewan, it's really interesting how he felt. Multiple times he said, you know, if his dad ever got out, he hoped that him and his mom never reconciled because the relationship was toxic. He said multiple times that Ewan deserved better. And so I guess the first time around, I didn't pay attention to that and just how much he did not want to be like his dad, but also how much he really thought Ewan was the better fit for his mom.
That's kind of weird to me because you would think that
Mhm.
he would have loyalty to his dad. Most children do. But I think the fact of him knowing that Tobias did try to hurt Arya really impacts that. And he's so scared for Arya that he just can't fathom her being with Tobias.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll get back to more of that with Tobias in a moment, and Arya, because I think that part of their story is important too. But tell us about when Stacey is visiting Tobias. She's visiting him in the American prison, and she doesn't show up one time. What happens?
He breaks out. He knew right then that something was wrong. Actually, when he buys Stacey from the auction and he comes in and she sees that it's him, he tells her, "You missed a visit and I was bored and I broke out." So he already knew everything that was going on. Stacey was visiting him constantly and he knew. So when she didn't show up to something that she had been faithfully showing up to, he absolutely knew it was time.
Yeah, he knew she was in trouble. Like something had happened and he had to go help her, which that's what I loved about Tobias. And I loved that he called her little one, that she was like his daughter too. I loved that
Oh,
part.
he was the father she never had and that she
Yeah.
should have had. Her father never protected her the way that he should have. He never listened when she tried to speak out about what was going on with her, and
Hmm.
she never had that parent to protect her. So when
Yeah.
Tobias does, you know, that's why it means so much to Stacey, and she almost breaks down every time because it's something that she never had and then she finally got from the strangest place.
Yeah, I remember that there was a part in the book that I read, I believe it was in Restitution, and it was after he had saved her from that auction. And she, you know, just had her head laying on his chest, and she said in her head, "Forgive me, Arya, but this is the safest place I've ever felt, and I don't want to leave." Like, it
Right.
was
But
beautiful.
I don't think it was ever anything like that she
Mm-mm.
should have been saying forgive me because
Yeah.
it wasn't anything like that. There was a couple times Tobias even said there's only one woman and her name is
Yeah.
Arya. It's cute, but you know, there was never anything there.
Yeah. I think it was just because their story is so obsessive that she was probably like, "Ugh, forgive me, Arya." Those
Right.
2 were those 2 were a mess. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about Kade and Tobias. Why don't you take us into Stacey and Chris and how they fit into the story?
Yeah, so let's talk about them. Their relationship is clearly one of the most toxic ones out of the story. There's not just one villain, there's two. There's Chris and there's
Yeah.
Bernadette. So both of our main characters has a villain that they're fighting, and Chris is Stacey's. He has done everything horrible to her that a human can possibly do.
Yeah. And she was his stepsister. And that's where we kind of see this start, this obsessive tendency from her brother, which I also found interesting this read again, is that I noticed a lot of similarities between Chris and Tobias. They're obviously very different people, and I am not Team Chris, but they're both psychopathic, which I didn't pay
Yep.
attention to the first time.
The main difference between Tobias and Chris, I think, is Tobias knew that he had a problem. Tobias went to therapy. He got on meds. His mom and his stepdad really pushed for Tobias to be better, whether he liked it or not. Chris's mom just swept it under the rug. She knew he had a problem. She saw the tendencies and she didn't care. She just acted like her baby was perfect and just
Yeah.
let him go on. So he continued to let this behavior happen.
Yeah. And Stacy, she goes to her dad and she tells him, Chris starts this when she is, I think the first initial thing was Twister when she was 12, if I remember correctly. And then he really started abusing her at 15. But she tells her dad, and he does not believe her.
Right.
Which, I mean, can you imagine? Like, you go to tell your parent that this person in the house is sexually abusing you, physically abusing you, and they say, "Stop making up lies." I mean, that would make you wanna shut down.
I think that's one of the most ultimate betrayals that a parent can do to a child is them come to you asking for help and you tell them they're lying. That's awful.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, literally, a parent is there to protect your children, and her dad failed her so badly. And not just her dad, but her stepbrother Kyle too. And I know a lot of people kind of give him some, um feel really angry towards him about it. But I think that he really just believed that maybe his brother was obsessive because he always wanted a little sister. But then, you kind of think maybe he knew and he just didn't want to confess it. I don't know. What are your thoughts there?
I think he knew deep down. Whether he knew exactly, no, I know he didn't know exactly, but he had to know that something was going on. I'm sure you could tell by Stacey's body language, the way she acted. I mean, when you are occupying the same room as your abuser, you act different. He had to have seen some signs. There's no way that he couldn't have. So I think that he just wanted to pretend like it wasn't as bad as what it was until there at the end when he couldn't deny it anymore.
Yeah. Now, how do you feel about Stacy not telling anybody? Because I have an opinion that I really do understand. I know a lot of people get really frustrated with her, and I'm curious to hear your opinion on it. But I felt like I sympathized with her because she told the one person that was supposed to believe her, and he didn't. And so for her, it was like I might as well not tell anybody. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Did you get frustrated with her that she didn't tell what was going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many points that I felt like she could have at least told Cade. Maybe,
Yeah.
her dad didn't believe her. Maybe the stepmom wouldn't, or even Kyle. But I feel like there was nothing that would have stopped Cade from believing her. And I do think that Cade would have stopped at nothing to help. Or if it was even a case of embarrassment, tell Luciella. She could have tried to do anything. So it was very frustrating, but when you're in a situation and you're scared that this person is going to hurt people if you tell them, I guess, being as young as what she was, maybe the fear was just so much that she just couldn't do it because she was afraid that Chris would kill them all.
Yeah, and a lot of abusers, that's what they do. They threaten, and if you tell anybody, I'm going to hurt them. And I think for her, like a lot of people probably in the real life situations, they're scared. They're just scared and they don't want to tell anybody because they don't want anybody to get hurt. On this side of it, obviously as a book, we're like, Cade could have totally taken care of it. Cade was tough, but she was scared. And so it makes me sympathetic to her about it.
Right. It's one of those things that you don't know what you would do until you're in that situation, which hopefully nobody ever gets into a situation like that, but we just don't know until it would happen to us.
Yeah. But I will say the thing I loved about Stacy is that she really grew a backbone by the end. She stopped being afraid of him by restitution. She was not afraid of Chris anymore and ends up being the one that Chris dies, he dies by her hand. She kills him.
Yeah, which is very much deserved at that point. But going back to Kate and Stacey, I want to hear what you think about their chemistry and what you thought about when they first started to realize they had feelings for each other and how it progressed so quickly at such a young age.
Yeah, so because I had not read Psychotic Obsession first, my first go round into the books, I actually had different opinions than the second time having known Psychotic Obsession. So reading it the first time, I just thought like, oh my gosh, it's a love at first sight kind of situation. He just laid eyes on her and he fell in love with her. Now, after reading Psychotic Obsession, I'm like, okay, I see his dad's tendencies that he fights against, but they're there, and he sees her and he kind of locks in on her. And she is that thing that he becomes obsessed with. Now, I do believe that he loved her. Not even hesitating on that, but I do think right in the beginning it was obsession. What about you?
At one point, Jason or Basemom actually made fun of Kate for being a virgin at their age because, all of them, they had been with plenty of people, but Kate just had no interest until Stacey.
Yeah, which I find very interesting. And then, we know what happens to Cade by Archie and Bernadette. And so it makes what he endures that much worse because he hates physical touch. He hates intimacy. He hates all of those things with anyone except Stacy. And so to then endure that by their hands, it just makes it even worse. He's not like a normal guy, I'd say, who is like, okay, well, touch doesn't really bother me that much. Or I'm not saying that a man put in a trafficking ring would handle it any better. It's just that Cade was different. He didn't want to be touched.
So eventually we find out that Stacey gets pregnant by Kate and Chris finds out and beats her till she loses the baby. Then to teach her a lesson, he drugs her and Jason to set them up to sleep with each other and then sends it to Kate. That's the whole cheating thing at the beginning. What did you think when you finally found out the truth that she did not cheat? Because I'll speak for me, but I was upset with her that she cheated on him.
Yeah, for sure. When you read in the first book, Insatiable, you don't know. You don't know what's happened. You just see they lost a baby, and then he gets in a video of her sleeping with his brother. And so you're thinking, how could she do this? You really are angry at Stacy. But then as the books go on and you find out that this was all set up by Chris, it was all to teach her a lesson, like you said. And he sent it to Kate. It wasn't her fault. She was drugged. Jason, he thought that it was his fiancee, Gianna. She thought that it was Cade, but it was all Chris that did this. And really, when you kind of step back and look at all three of these books, it really was, in my opinion, Chris's fault that this whole thing happened.
Yeah, absolutely. He's the one that set everything into motion at this point. He's the one that felt like Stacy was his. To him, Cade was taking over his property. So then he sets all this stuff into motion and Cade thinks Stacy cheats on him. So then he's in a bad spot. That opens it up for Bernadette with Cade.
Yeah. Now, how did you feel? What were your opinions on Cade not getting their side of it? Because he never gets Stacy's side or Jason's side. What was your opinion on that?
I don't like that he never once thought to speak to them. I understand being upset and I understand being hurt. I understand the betrayal, but you could have at least let them try to explain, even if not Stacy, your brother, the one that has been there, that has done all these things with you, that has loved you like a true brother. You, to me, could have given him some room to explain, which I understand Jason didn't know that he was drugged at the time,
Oh.
but he had to have known that something was wrong because he never would have touched Stacy otherwise.
Yeah, he didn't give them the chance, and it made me very angry because Stacy knew. Jason didn't know, but Stacy knew what had happened after, and it could have all been solved by her just telling him exactly what happened, which she wanted to, but he wouldn't hear. So that really frustrated me that he didn't even give her a chance.
I agree. One of the things that bugs me the most is miscommunication. And I
Mhm.
understand they're young, but sometimes if you just open your mouth and talk, things could have been so much simpler than going through all this if you just talked it out with someone. And also, I think deep down, Cade should have realized that Jason wouldn't have done that to him. He may not have known Stacy for long periods of time, but he knew Jason. And I think that it would have been kind of clear something went wrong there because Jason would have never done that to him. He loved Kade too much.
Yeah, Jason was 11 years older than Kade, and Kade really went to him with everything. In the book, you see, Kade go into Jason when he kisses Stacey for the first time. He's the first one he tells when they get pregnant. All of these things. And then we hear about Jason teaching him, how to do all the little kid things like softball and like baseball, all those things. And so they were really close. So, like you said, at the very least, he should have known that Jason wouldn't have done that to him. And even his dad in prison, Tobias tells him, like, son, you need to talk to them. You need to see what's going on. And he's just like, no, like they cheated. She cheated on me.
Right. And then we find out that Luciella had actually willingly slept with Chris. What did you think when that come out?
Yeah, so I was super confused because he said something about that at the end, and I was like, "Wait, what?" Like, he slept with Luciella too? So I thought she was drugged, and then you keep
Yeah.
reading a little bit more, and you find out that she wasn't, and she just said he cried like a baby after sex, which I was like, "Oh my gosh, he seems like it." But, yeah, I didn't know Luciella, and that part really was emotional for me when Chris says that because Ewan is standing there, beating him alongside Tobias. And when he makes that comment about Lou, Ewan steps in and punches him and says, "Don't talk about my daughter that way." And that was beautiful because that's his stepdaughter and he loves her no different than Jason. So it was just a really beautiful moment.
Yeah. I mean, Ewan, I think it's unanimous that Ewan is such an amazing guy.
Did you find some of the scenes too difficult to get through? Like in Restitution where Chris is kinda getting what he deserves, that revenge. Did you find that really hard to get through, or did you feel satisfied with it?
I don't think that there is anything that could have really made it feel like it was enough. No matter what Chris took from Kade and Stacey, what Bernadette and Archie took from Kade and Stacey, I don't think that there was ever going to feel like it was just enough. I know that once he's dead and it's over, it was like you're able to breathe. It's finally over. But he took so much from Kade and Stacey that in some ways it felt like death was too simple, but yet no one wanted to let him live any longer.
Yeah, I agree. I think that he could have gone through some more, and I don't think anybody would have been mad about it reading reading him
Yeah.
going through a little bit more, but Cade thoroughly tortured him, cut fingers off, nails through the eyes, cut a foot off, multiple stab wounds. I mean, it was horrendous, and the whole time, Chris is still so obsessed, and saying, "Just get away from her, she's mine," and, I mean, it was crazy to read that he's still, as he's being tortured, still has this crazy idea that Stacey is his.
Right. And what the thing is, the difference between Kate and Chris, they're both obsessed with Stacy. The difference between Kate and Chris is that Kate loves Stacy as a person, as a human, as a partner. Chris loves Stacy like you would love a dog or a farm animal or your property because that's all Chris looked at Stacy as was property. She was his, but not in a loving way, but in a I own you kind of way.
I completely agree. He made those comments all the time about her being his. And in the Leigh Rivers world, which we'll talk about in another episode, but in Web of Silence, Malachi says to Olivia, "You're mine." And yet it doesn't feel like Chris. I mean, she's amazing how she writes her things, but it doesn't feel the same way. When Chris said it, it was like you said that it was property. He didn't really love her, though he repeatedly told her he loved her, and he repeatedly said, "Why won't you love me?" And, "One day you'll love me," or pretend it's Cade when we're together or whatever. But, it was amazing that even still he was that delusional to think that she was his, even to the very end.
Well, like most things in life, it comes down to consent. Stacy did not want to be his. There was nothing about Chris that was appealing to her. She wanted Cade. She loved Cade. So it has to be reciprocated. It definitely has to be that that person can reciprocate the feelings instead of thinking you're going to force these feelings on somebody like Chris thought he could. You can't do that. Even when sometimes it seems like they don't want to, deep down, these women do. They want them. But there was nothing like that with Chris. In the dark romance genre, there's sometimes that lines do get blurred, but the women still want it. But with Chris, he just thought he could make her, and that's where the problem begins.
Yeah, like in that consensual non-consent that we talked about in the first episode, that's that kind of situation where you pretend you don't want it, but you do. In this case, she made it very clear. There was no two discussions beforehand and consensual agreement. It was, I don't want you. And Chris just continually took from her. Kade gave, he gave himself, but Chris just took everything from her.
Right. Well, if you look, Chris was willing to not only trade Stacey to his friends because they were trying to blackmail him with some tapes that they had, but he also was willing to send Stacey into the lion's den with Bernadette over sex tapes as well. He was so selfish that he truly couldn't have loved Stacey anyways. If you love somebody, you don't trade them for things or let other people that she doesn't consent to touch her.
Right. There was never an indication of true love. It was obsessive love. And even comparing that to Tobias, his obsessive love with Arya, he learned to love her. He learned to genuinely love her, and that meant going on meds. That meant going to counseling, and even for him, that meant staying in prison because she was happier.
Oh, yeah, he stated multiple times that he was not stuck in that prison. He was there because that was what was best for her. So let's talk about Cade's best friend, Base, and all the things that he ends up going through. What did you think when you first met him?
Okay, so I loved Bass from the get-go. He is goofy and funny, and you can tell later on that he uses that humor as a way to cope, but that's also just who he is. He's so funny. And so he, like you said at the beginning, he takes over the Russian mafia. I believe it's his granddad that is the current head of it, and then passes it down to him. But I think a lot of people who read Edge of Darkness just have him as a fan favorite. He's just a great guy. And he goes through a lot with Kade. They're best friends in the beginning. You see kind of his love story and Lou's unfold a little, which we'll talk about more in a minute. But he's eventually kidnapped and sex trafficked alongside of Kade. And Kade did a lot to save Base. They were forced into sexual acts. There was even one point where Kade was given the choice to cut Base badly or cut himself. And of course, Kade chose to cut himself. So I think Base was just a good friend, solid friend the whole time. Even when he got out, he didn't want to leave Kade. What were your thoughts on him?
I think he was a much needed comedic relief in this story. When you have such heavy themes like The Edge of Darkness does, you do have to have some sort of light-hearted, funny kind of person to take a little bit of the edge off and not have everything so heavy. It has to be rewarding as well. So I think that Base was so needed in this story. I think that his relationship with Luciella was kind of rocky for a while because she didn't know if Base really wanted her or if he was, messing around. But eventually it becomes clear that Base actually really cared for Luciella.
Base, he's known as that playboy. And so for Lou, there was no indication that it was serious. It was just more playing around.
Right. And it seems like Luciella was really weird about interdating with friend groups. Stacey was so petrified for Luciella to find out about her and Kade. And Des and Tyler, they were a little scared to tell Luciella too. So she was very funny about the two friend groups intermingling with each other.
Yeah, I thought that was very odd. Typically, maybe you don't want things to be messed up in a friendship, but then also you're not the way Lou is about it. Like, they were all scared to tell her. And then Stacey wouldn't even tell her she was pregnant. And then in the very end, when Stacey admits all the things, Lou gets angry at her. She's just gone through horrendous things and Lou's mad. And Tyler is like, come on now, give her a second. She was tortured. But Lou's really weird about that, like you said.
Right, I wish it would have kind of elaborated, like, what the big deal was, like, it wasn't just like a, "Ooh, that's my brother," type thing, like, she was very serious, so I wish it would have said, like, what the problem was there, but I don't think it ever touched on it, like, why she was so adamant to not mix the 2.
Yeah, I wish it would have too. It would have been helpful to kinda know her thoughts, which maybe we'll get more of that when her and Base's book comes out. Maybe we'll get a little bit more of a backstory on what her mind is thinking, because she's the daughter of Tobias. And so it'll be interesting to see how her brain works. We've gotten inside of Cade's, but not hers. So that'll be interesting to see and what her thoughts were with that.
Right, well, it would be fair to assume that she has some traits of Tobias too, not just Cade, so it'll be interesting to see what exactly goes through her head too.
Yeah, I agree, and just why that was such a big deal for her. Okay, so let me ask you about Arya and Ewan. So I'm gonna tell you real quick. Ewan was my favorite character in all of these books, and I will forever have a soft side with Ewan. So tell me what your thoughts are about Arya and Ewan, and then I'll give you my hot take on it.
So I love Arya and Ewan. I think that there is actually some qualities there that could have led us to a kind of harem. I would have been okay with it. I know a lot of people wouldn't, but I think it would have been great for Arya at least. And nobody male wise would have gotten hurt. That's the main thing. I didn't want to see Tobias hurt. I didn't want to see Ewan hurt. And I think that Arya really did love them both, just in different ways.
Yeah, so I agree a lot with that, and I think Ewan's just an underrated character. Like you said, I think, a harem would have been good, but I'm gonna tell you my controversial opinion is that I really didn't like Arya. I thought that Ewan deserved so much better than her. When Tobias is in prison, she goes to visit him, and then you learn in one of the books that Tobias got the room with the bed and they were sleeping together until Cade steps in and says, "Hey, I need you to stop this." So, the whole thing in Psychotic Obsession is that Ewan cheated on her when he was 18 and how she could not forgive him. And that was this whole thing. And yet, for who knows how many years, she was having an affair with Tobias. And then when Tobias gets out, she would be crying in Tobias's chest while she's holding Ewan's hand. And Ewan would be in the kitchen and she'd go walk in the garden with Tobias. I did not like Arya. Dare I say, a little bit of a hoe. Like, I just didn't like her.
Yeah, their relationship is a very odd dynamic. It never really touched on any of it and how it was working there when they were in the cabin. But I do think that I remember Tobias telling Stacey at one point that Ewan watched them have sex while they were there because Stacey's like, "Oh my god, I don't need to know that. Don't tell me that." And then he's like, "But look at them; they're happier than ever." And it's like, okay, this is strange.
Yeah, I remember when I read that part though, but if you remember, Tobias said that Ewan felt like his relationship with Arya was falling apart and he wanted to fix it. To me, I'm just reading into it, but I thought, well, yeah, it's falling apart because she's got another man here that she's loving all alone. So I still feel like that was her fault. Like, the relationship was falling apart because of that, and then because he watches them, Tobias says they're happier than ever. To me, it breaks my heart because it's like the lengths that Ewan will go through to make her happy with him again. I hated it. And I know Leigh Rivers can do no wrong, and I agree. However, I think Arya, it wasn't a good choice, Leigh. I'm sorry. This one, I didn't like her. I really didn't.
Well, I don't know about anybody else, but I will never think that bringing a third person into a marriage will fix anything. That's like thinking a baby's going to fix everything. It doesn't. So I'm not sure what that was, but I think that everybody was in the agreement that Ewan deserved a little bit better here.
I agree, even Stacey, and at one point, when she's talking to Ewan about it, and she said, "I'm sorry, but I feel like you deserve better," and he said, "I know, but I love her too much to accept it." Like, that just It breaks my heart. I will forever be a Ewan fan. I will forever think he deserved infinitely better because he was the most faithful guy. Yeah, he cheated at 18. Okay, well, what about her cheating the whole time? So I don't know. I'm just a fan of Ewan. I think he was great. You see, Kade really looks up to Ewan. Ewan stepped in and loved Lou and Kade, obviously like his own children, and Kade respected him a lot.
Yeah, now that is the nice thing. Even though both parties had children with another person, they both raised these kids together. And that is something that I will commend them on. They loved the kids, they loved them, they raised them well. And that I do commend them on because that's hard. It's hard to raise another person's kid.
Yeah, because Jason wasn't Arya's, and
Right.
Lou and Kade weren't Ewan's, and they really had a blended family. And so I can't imagine, how hard that would have been. Now, do you think Ewan should have left Arya?
You know, Sometimes I think that people really convince themselves that they can love the other person enough for the both of them. And I think that's where Ewan's at. And
Yeah.
if he's happy, I guess who are we to tell him anything else? If that's what he wanted and he was happy there, everybody is an adult and I guess they make their own decisions there. But had it have been me, yes, I would have left.
Yeah. I'd be carrying the justice for Ewan pickets.
Yeah,
I absolutely think he should have left Arya. I think he absolutely deserved somebody that would have loved him with their whole heart. Arya couldn't. She had half a heart to give to him and half to Tobias. And, to me, that's just my little opinion, but I think everybody deserves to be loved with a whole heart.
I agree. Now, what do you think about Ewan's reaction when Jason was killed?
Oh, it ruined him. I mean, it absolutely ruined him to walk out and see his son murdered. And I remember in the story right before that, Jason had said to Stacey, "I'll protect you even if I have to take a bullet for you." And he did. But for Ewan to walk out and see his only son, and he even said, "I can't do this without you." Like, that just it tore me to pieces, probably because, like, he has half of Arya and she's happy, but, like, Jason is his, and then Jason's gone, and Ewan was already getting angry, when Chris was in the basement, but I think he just he's done with it all after that point.
Right? Normally, you're used to seeing the psychotic tendencies from Tobias. So when that flip switches in Ewan, it's kind of like, wow, maybe Ewan isn't the teddy bear that we thought he was because he comes out of nowhere with some really dark things. But Jason being killed just really did it for him.
I agree. I think it was just too much. Let's talk about Jason then. Again, this is Cade's stepbrother, and Jason is a pawn of Chris. He loses his fiancee, Gianna, after that happens, and he kind of spirals into a drug addiction. I wonder if Cade not talking to him further made him spiral even more. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think that he was losing everything all at once. I think that losing Gianna, Cade, even Arya and Ewan to an extent, because as much as you don't want to choose between your children, that they had to have been kind of upset thinking that Jason would do that to Cade. So losing everybody all at once really impacted Jason negatively. So then he gets into a drug addiction and starts really having his life go downhill.
Yeah, and he tries to get it back on track. He's just in the beginning of that. Things are starting to look up while Cade is withdrawing and going through, really psychotic disassociation moments after he's saved from Bernadette and Archie. Jason is with him a lot. And that morning that Cade wakes up, Stacy's got to go tell Cade that Jason's just been killed. And she goes upstairs to tell Cade, and he says, basically, "Can you take me to Jason? I need to apologize." And it was too late.
Yeah, so he never got to apologize to Jason, and that's heart-wrenching because he wanted to tell him he's sorry, and he doesn't get that opportunity.
Now, none of this would have happened, obviously, without the Sawyers. They are the ones, Bernadette is the one that shot Jason. So let's talk about Bernadette and Archie. So like you said, there's two villains in the story. We have Chris, but then we also have the Sawyers. Now, tell us a little bit about who they are.
Okay, so we find out that Bernadette has been preying on Kade since he's been about 15 or 16. And not only is it Bernadette, but it's her husband Archie that is preying on Kade. So they end up using him as like a sex toy, but they also use him as a hitman. So that's why Kade has no qualms about killing people, because we do find out that he kills all the people that Stacey had been with, because he's already being used as a hitman to protect Tobias, because Bernadette threatens Tobias. She does end up going on to start threatening other family members, but it did start out as him just protecting his dad.
Yeah, and we find out that Bernadette is essentially like the head of Scotland Yard. Like she's really high up in that area. So, she really can't be touched. And not only that, she has ties so strongly to America, but because she's in Scotland, she has so much ties to America that if Kade steps out of line, Tobias is in solitary. She has a lot of pull. And so, like you said, she grooms him, she blackmails him, she manipulates him into being an assassin and an escort. And it's not just her, it's Archie too. At one point, I believe Kade was 19 and Kade was late coming back from an assignment. And Archie kept him chained in the basement for days, raping him. And you hear Kade in the story wake up and say he woke up in pee and blood and he was scared. He even admits he was scared at 19. Archie is just, he's an evil man. And then you learn Archie also did it to his own daughter, Cassie, which
Right.
is just crazy to me.
Yeah, Cassie is definitely a character that I have some hot takes on. I do kind of wish that Kade wouldn't have just shot her, because I do feel like she was a victim too, because her parents were some very extreme sickos. That's what she's seen her whole life. And I do think that she believed that Kade loved her. I also don't think that she was actually the one that forced Kade into sex. I think it was Bernadette. So I just wish that maybe Cassie could have had a little bit of a chance of redemption, because she was not the monster in this. She was a victim too.
Yeah, I think Cassie was kind of the product of two psychopaths, not in the way that Kade and Lou are, but in a way that she's also really, like you said,
Yeah.
she really thinks that Kade loves her. But then, if we're angry at Stacey for not speaking out, then we should be angry at Cassie for not doing it too when her dad raped her also. But then again, they're the head of all of this police stuff. And where is she going to go? What is she going to do?
Right. She doesn't know anything but that life. But,
Yeah.
with Bernadette, like you said, she has so much control. Like, we thought Chris was bad by him being able to sit there and kill a man and then walk into the police station and they just turned Stacey over to him. Chris has nothing on the kind of pull that Bernadette has.
Yeah, and then we learn with Bernadette, the reason that she kind of had her eye on Kade was because she had her eyes on Tobias. And when she couldn't get Tobias, she decided to go after Kade. So when Tobias stepped in to trade himself for Kade, she was like, yeah, let's do this. Like, I'm ready to trade you for him, which is just sick.
Yeah. And what I find funny is when they actually get the news report that Tobias had broken out of prison, they were scared. You could just tell the fear that Tobias was going to come for Kate, and they knew that they didn't want to deal with him without them drugging him or having him tied down like she eventually does when he trades himself, which still doesn't work for her. But I loved that they knew to be scared.
Absolutely. Archie was terrified. And I loved it. And, Archie, he got his ending. How did you feel about that when Kate is outside live streaming this murder of Archie? Because one of my favorite quotes that he says is, "My name is Kade Mitchell, and I'm the son of Tobias Mitchell, and I will not be afraid anymore, or I will not be silent anymore. I loved that part. But how did you feel about Cade live streaming the murder?
I don't think that there was any ending that really suited any of them because of all the terrible things that they had done. But I do think that when Cade live streamed it, I think it was freeing for him because he knew one way or another to take them down, he was going to go down with them. So he had to do what he had to do. And I think that it was just his moment of, you know what, I'm ending this. It basically started with him and it's going to end with him.
Yeah, and he had been afraid for so long under them and silent for so long, and then now he's like, "No more. It doesn't matter." Kind of like Stacey in the end when she's like, "I don't care what you do to me." He was kind of in that same headspace of like, I'm done. I'm done being your puppet. I don't care if I go to prison. I'm okay with that now. You've taken everything from me." So, and then when Bernadette is killed and Bass is just so emotional, it's one of the only times I think you see Bass actually emotional. And he says, "How do we live? Like, she took everything from us." That part is so heartbreaking to read.
Right. I think for a minute, Bass thought once she was dead that he was going to have like this weight off of his shoulders and things would start going back to normal. But as soon as they kill her, he realizes nothing is going to get back what she took.
Yeah. I mean, how can you rewind the time on the torture? They drugged them. They kept them continuously, had an IV just for fluids to keep them alive as they were sold for sex. At one point, Cade tells Stacey in the Latvian language, that I'm sold for sex and death to protect those I love. And that includes you, Freckles. And like he had just accepted that that's what it was. But I don't know. I think because he was Tobias's son, he had more of a mental capacity, which you see it just completely breaks him. But I don't think Bass could have withstood the many years that Cade did.
No, absolutely not. I know being the leader of the Russian mafia, he's going to have to get a stomach on him. But with being born without those tendencies, it's just not to the level of what Cade or Tobias is.
I agree. And we do see some things change, which in our episode about the Web of Silence, we'll deal with that a little bit more with Bass. But like you said, this is not your typical person that has to deal with this stuff. Cade, I do think, had a greater capacity for it, but a normal person being sold into sex slavery couldn't have even lasted as long. I mean, I just don't think that's normal for any human to do.
Well, not to mention, he almost loses his life. Bernadette shoots him in the chest. So when you're that close to death, you got the trauma of being shot, almost dying, Cade having to beg for your life, then all of the sexual abuse. But then she also sends Bass on jobs with Cade too. So he's killing random people too. They almost kill Stacey without being told who their target was. So all that bottled into one is going to traumatize a normal person.
And not to mention the sexual abuse they were forced to partake in together. Bass, as you said, he was bisexual, so maybe that stuff didn't bother him as much, but it really bothered Cade. And so many times he'd say, "I wonder if Stacey would still love me if she knew." It really bothered him. And then at the end, in front of Bernadette, Bass tries to do something and Cade's like, "I'm sorry." And I understand Bass is like saying, taking some power back, but Cade's like, "No, like I can't do this with you." So it really bothered him. And then to be forced to do that for somebody's sick pleasure, I can't imagine how mentally overwhelming that would be.
Right. And to do that to two people that have been best friends for so long that would hope to continue to be best friends after this, they're lucky that she didn't rip their friendship apart. But thankfully, it was stronger than that.
For sure. And so this trilogy, man, it deals with some severe triggers. We have non-con, we have abuse, we have blackmail, sexual trafficking, mental illness. Cassie, do you think that Leigh pushed the boundary a little bit too far in this book, or do you think that the eventual payoff and restitution made it worth the emotional damage?
I think she pushed it too far at all. I think that it was just enough. I think the trauma was there, but the emotional payoff, the reward was there too. So I think she did it perfectly. I think it had the right amount of spice. There's nothing that I would have added to it. I think it was fine how it is.
I agree. I think that Like we said, apart from Arya, she can do no wrong. So I think she did great. Anything she writes it's so well written. And like you said, the plot and spice, any spice that was there was so emotionally undergirded for the particular scene or for whatever was going on. So she handled it really well. I think it was perfection all the way through.
I agree.
Now, do you think that Restitution gave them the happy ending they deserved?
The only one that I think didn't get the happy ending they deserved was Base and Luciella. Now, what we did get on them, I didn't like at all. I don't like that the kids weren't able to go up to Base, say hi, Dad, really act like that was their dad in public. That really bothered me. Other than that, I think everyone did, but I'm hoping, as you said, we are getting Base and Lou's story, which we're all very excited about. I'm hoping that gets corrected.
Yeah, I hope so too, because like you said, that also really bothered me to know that, Lou gets pregnant. He's forced into an arranged marriage. I think her name is Nikita, but they both understand what it is. They both didn't consummate the marriage. They kind of lied about that. But then you have Lou, who's pregnant. They have children. And like you said, the kids aren't allowed to go up to daddy if Nikita's there. It's this whole for years and years, because at the end of Restitution, there's a years, so many years jump. And so we see that it's still the same. The kids can't go up to dad. They can't call him dad in front of certain people, even though they know it's dad. That was hard.
It was. Okay, so now that we're starting to wrap up this episode, couple questions. If you had to be stuck in a room with one character for 24 hours, who would you pick?
It would either be Ewan, just because he's my favorite, or Base, just for the humor. I know people would probably say, oh, Kade, and I get it. I get the allure, but I'm a softie for Ewan, and I just loved Base's humor. What about you?
Base.
Yeah.
It would have to be. I love laughing. I love just how funny he was, and I really think that it could be a really funny time. So he'd definitely be the one that I would pick.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, if you could slap a character, who would it be?
I think that if I had to choose anyone, it's going to be Arya. I just want her to get herself together and make up her mind, pick something, I don't know, or get everybody to consent to a harem, do something. Don't hurt these men that we love so much. Figure it out. What about you?
100%. 100% I would have slapped Arya. Like, girl, get yourself together. Because it hurt both men. So, like, just be a normal human and pick one. Or, like you said, let's have the discussion. Is this what we're going to do? Are we going to be a throuple or whatever it is? And
Yeah.
let's call it a day. But this back and forth, it definitely made me want to slap her.
Right. Okay, last one. If you could be Stacey in one scene, which would you pick?
Oh, that one's hard. It would probably be the gun scene. What about you?
Um, I mean, I think that's across the board. That is one of the best scenes that Leigh put in this book. It's so hot and while traumatizing in its own right. But I mean, I don't think there's another scene that you could pick that quite matches that one.
Yeah, I agree. Possibly the plane scene as next, but still not topping that one for
No,
sure.
I don't think so. Nothing's gonna top it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so what about our scale that we made for dark romance, 1 to 4, and where this one falls? What do we rate this one?
So for the darkness category, we're going to rate this a 3. On spice, what did we rate this for spice?
We went all the way 4. Melded Kindle, our trigger warning scale. What do we do for that?
4. This has a lot of triggers. Okay, emotional damage. What did we rate this?
Definitely all the way a 4. Therapy recommended. Okay,
Yes.
and then what about overall obsession rating? What do we think?
5 hearts. We are so obsessed with this series. It is one of our all-time favorites, that's for sure.
I'd say we're pretty obsessed.
Yes. For our specific Obsessions After Dark scale, where did we put this one?
This one was definitely a 3, unhinged. It's not something that you want to start with in dark romance. You definitely want to try some other things before you go into it, just knowing that it's going to be so heavy, emotionally, trigger warning heavy, spice heavy, you know, all the things. I think it's definitely a 3. It's not something you just wanna step into.
Right, absolutely. So this wraps up this episode. And on our next episode, we actually have our very first author interview that you will not want to miss. And all I can say is the MMC definitely gives Cade vibes.
Yeah, so excited for that interview. So, thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe, like, and share to support our channel. We are on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. We have our TikTok and our Instagram. And if you're an author who would like to be a guest on our show, please reach out to us by email, which can be found on any of our Obsessions After Dark social medias. And until next time, stay obsessed, and we'll see you after dark.